live with John Clayton. John's part of the ATG for Coaches community, and that's how we came in contact. But he's actually got a really powerful and important story to tell, and a lot of experiences around the challenges that a lot of professional athletes go through. John's managed to come back from career-ending injury and sort of, I guess, a failed childhood dream. Like a lot of the people that I work with had massive aspirations as athletes and didn't quite get to do what they wanted. Some did, but most didn't. John's turned that into finding solutions and helping other athletes to overcome the challenges. So the conversation today will explore that journey. Thanks so much for making your time available to have this conversation. Can you start sort of by sharing a bit around your early journey there as an athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you having me on as well, mate. I know this is like a really good opportunity to have a chat and pick your brain because you're one of the masterminds behind ATG, and Real Movement before that. For me, where I've come from is that I had some real aspirations, obviously, growing up, wanting to make NRL and play professional football. And I think maybe there's a subgroup of like those guys that have the natural talent. I wasn't one of those, so I had to really work hard at this. So I came up with a bit of a plan for myself, which was, get the grind, figure out the strength stuff. I think we all fall in love with the strength when you start to see just those small incremental improvements and that type of thing. And I found that worked for me. So I actually got some good opportunities out of that. The effort reward ratio seemed to be well reflected. So I could like see when I put in effort, I got that outcomes until a certain point. And it was about 18, 19 when it started to be that the more effort I put in, the more I would have side effects. So like, knee tendonitis would start to pop up. I didn't know what it was at the time, but not fun. Achilles tendonitis, all these sort of overuse injuries when I was just trying to put in more effort than my competition to like outdo them. So that was sort of where I started, I think, for me. And I know that I see this now in other athletes as well, is that when you build this mindset around I have to make it, you have this sort of control agenda where if you're not going to make it, then what's going to happen when something takes that control away from you? So for me, once I got injuries and had no control, then I started to find a bit of a spiral of my thinking and where my life went for a little while and things like that. So meeting with athletes now, I still see, some of those tricky thoughts popping up and notice that these traps are pretty common. And I don't think I was alone. I think that's probably the underlying thing of what I would like to be working towards, is that it's a pretty common experience, and some of the skills are like broad around things like psychological flexibility, where we can teach you skills that work in multiple contexts rather than just at helping you achieve sport. And then when you get injured, don't help you make you flow, don't help you flourish, and help make you suffer. So that's sort of where we come from.
Yes, it's often it is that single-minded commitment of the athlete that allows pro athletes to become pro athletes. Is that psychological flexibility, like, is that sort of something that would take away from being that pro athlete, or is it something that is going to complement the journey whether you make it or not?
So this is definitely one I've had to think about, because you definitely see it. You've seen it as well. These athletes that have these really like black and white rules. I either do this, otherwise I'm a failure. The old "I'm not first, I'm last" sort of thoughts. And then like
Yeah.
the Last Dance, Michael Jordan. I watched that and thinking, this is a guy with a very rigid mindset that has achieved great things, but then possibly turns that into the rest of his life and hits barriers with that. So I know it's probably a controversial view, but my thought is that you can have broken clocks right twice a day. That's my theory on people with fixed mindsets that are professional athletes that do well. They could do it with building psychological flexibility and still get to the outcomes they want, as long as they're building the six facets of the hexaflex, which we'll talk about later if we get a bit of time. But if they're still doing that, they don't need these rigid mindsets that come a bit of a crutch. As soon as Michael Jordan would have got an injury, that mindset wasn't helpful, or it would have been, debilitating, and he would have been suffering. And how was his relationships around that? How are you, everything? And I think for every Michael Jordan might be an example that's a hard one. There's 50 other athletes that then have maladaptive stuff that happens after they, get these rigid do or die type thought processes that go along with it.
Yeah. So what is mind flexibility?
Yeah, and it'll be
Psychological
interested.
flexibility.
Yeah, I'll be interested in hearing more about MindFlex and the stuff you've done and put there, because I think that's probably helped me understand the differences between that and psychological flexibility in the literature.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, psychological flexibility is a term in the literature, where mind flex is a term that my money mastery mentor, Paul Council, a guy that I've been learning from, he speaks a lot about mind flex and doesn't use the word mindset, because we don't want a set mind. A set mind can't change. And so, yeah, that's what you're sort of referring to there. So what is psychological flexibility in the literature?
It has a lot of different ways of being described. I'd say the main one is the ability to shift the way you respond to a stimulus based on its context. So I'd say psychological rigidity, which could be mindset, like a set mind, would be, I learned that if I approach something by giving all my effort constantly, then I get success. That might have happened in a rugby league context, and then I try and apply that to my relationship, and I just apply all my effort into that relationship, and I completely smother my partner. So that's a lack of flexibility, because I've extended that rule, and that rule's not helpful in this context. So psychological flexibility is about realizing each different context, changing your approach, and then being flexible enough that you're not automatically doing the same thing in each different environment. So that's the textbook definition. The way we look at it through acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the other psychological flexibility approach, is it's taking action guided by values despite difficult feelings and thoughts and emotions. So you could, if your goal is to what's a good scenario? You want to be a leader in your team. That's one I'm dealing with a few athletes at the moment. They want to be a leader, but one of the guys criticizes them. You then get the thought, "Oh, I'm a worthless player, or I'm not good enough at this." You got to then diffuse from that thought, act on your value, which is to reconnect with the team, and your value would be still leadership or empathy or compassion or whatever. So that's sort of where it goes with this type of stuff. It's acting congruent to values despite difficult thoughts and feelings and emotions.
Yeah, and for a lot of athletes, there are massive challenges around identity, whether it's through injury or not being selected, or contract negotiations, and all the way that family looks at you once you become a professional athlete. Like there's a ton of stuff to deal with that from the outside people don't necessarily understand about the pro athlete. I haven't experienced it firsthand, but I've been close to it, with a lot of the guys that I worked with. So if you're looking for that context specific is a big part of it, of recognizing, okay, this is the situation where I need this mind flexibility, or psychological flexibility, and then having the focus or the attention to be able to actually do something, like to continue down a path that you choose to go down. Is that sort of what you're pointing to there? Like what with it? Yeah. So with the example of the leadership, the athlete is kind of getting their confidence rocked or shaken by how the teammates responding to them.
Mm-hmm.
If the value is that they want to be a great leader, then they have to return to that value, return to what they're about. But how do they shift that emotional kind of thing of being mocked or being criticized?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a very different way of thinking. And if I take one step back to ACT, which is one of the main tools for psychological flexibility, acceptance commitment therapy, comes from Buddhist origins. So a lot of it is around observing the mind and noticing the aspects of the mind that are pulling, and we call it like hooking. It's one we often talk to clients about because it makes sense. You get hooked by a thought or hooked by an emotion, pulled into doing something. The real analogy there is the choice point. So you talked about choice there. One choice is towards the values. taking that committed action. The other one is then getting hooked and being automatic. So the brain is very good at running through pathways that keep us safe. So it will avoid discomfort, it'll avoid anxiety, fear, all these sorts of things that are going that put you into an environment where you're not sure, uncertainty.
Yeah.
I'd say the real big thing there is going to be that a lot of that for a professional athlete or someone in a leadership position is going to be that's where all the value is as well. You can't do a leadership role without being rejected at some point. You can't be a leader without feeling fear that you're not good enough or that you're, faking it and people are going to find out. All that stuff comes with because the brain will go, yeah, you were good today, but what about when you said that to blah, blah this morning? It just does that. It's trying to keep you safe, but it's not helpful. So the only way then is to re-engage, expose yourself back to that environment and then go again. And the thoughts will come, but the chatter, you can sort of just sit it down rather than have it hook you each time. And you unhook, each time you get unhooked, you just keep coming back to that.
So I imagine you've studied this because you've had your own challenges. I know you've had the injuries, but how has this impacted you personally? I know you're back playing, so you've been through a lot of this. Like, what's your personal journey been like with it?
Yeah, and I think back playing is a bit of a stretch. I'm playing local footy in a small competition, so it's fun, but it's nothing like playing any sort of state level stuff. But yeah, enjoying that. For myself, yeah. Look, I think I was just at a point where the things I'd used, all the patterns I'd used before, weren't working for me anymore. And I needed to figure out a new way of doing it. And I did want to talk to you about that because the first thing that I found that worked for me was breath work, and the heart math was the big one for that.
Yeah.
And I've just been, ever since I've been using that. But I've heard you mention it a couple of times, but I haven't heard you do a deep dive into it. So I wanted to just pick your brains on heart math as well. And
yeah. I think I came across it through Bruce Lipton, and I think Clint Greenshields might have put me onto Bruce Lipton back. We lived in the same apartment block in France when I worked with the Catalan Dragons, and we spent a bunch of time together. He made me tea a bunch of times, and we sat and spoke about things. But he really introduced me to a lot of different concepts, and I think that's where I came across it, or maybe through Paul Check. But I think they're both into it. But the concept of that heart rate variability correlates to health and to the mental state and hormonal balance and all those sorts of things is pretty well established in the literature. My understanding is that it came from sort of Soviet astronaut sort of space program research, where they realized that's a really good marker of, are these people going to survive? Are they adapting to this environment? Are they safe? And so yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty intuitive. Like you plug into your physiology with, for those who haven't heard of it, like you put a device on your ear, and or there's a handheld one version as well, but you can you got it there. Yeah. So it tells you what's going on with your heart at that moment, and it sort of seems almost like woo-woo to people who haven't looked at it, but there's a ton of research there. And then once you experience it for yourself, you go like, yeah, change of state is really possible. And yeah, I think breath work is probably the most like direct way for people to experience this. I'm all about experiential learning, and when you experience change of state through breath work, then you sort of know like, oh yeah, I can be very different in a short period of time based on what I do with my breath. But the same is sort of true for posture or thought patterns. There's different ways that you can change your state. Tony Robbins uses a lot of the dancing and jumping around and hugging people, and all those things will change your energy, change your state. But the heart math tool is one that's shown to sort of speed up recovery and get you back into the rest and digest sort of more parasympathetic dominant state. So I came across it through that, and I introduced it to a number of players and did a lot of it myself. It's not for a lot of guys it doesn't stick, but I think it's still a valuable experience for them to have, to know that they are in control of it, and that stuff is real. Like, it does matter what you're thinking about. It does matter how you're breathing. But yeah, I'd love to hear like what do you think about it? What's your experience been?
Well, for me, it was a bit of a game changer. Like, I'm the same as you. For myself and then for teaching other people, experiential is the way to do it. If they don't experience it, they're not taking it away. It doesn't come in the point of performance when they need it. It's just something that they heard. And, what can you remember when you're under stress? So for me, I started doing it and I felt an immediate impact on my physiology, especially. And straight away, I saw a change in my results at uni, which was where I was really struggling at the time. So I found I could study better. I was sleeping better. I still was playing footy, park footy at the time, and I noticed I stopped having that super build up of anxiety before a game. I used to vomit before games. I heard Ben talking about it doing that as well. But it was anxiety about my anxiety, like I shouldn't be feeling like this and this is too much. And so I would just do that in the morning for 20, 30 minutes, and then I'd come into the day and I'd feel that emotion come and go, and it would just like a surf in the urge, it would come and go. But since then I've done it. I'm up to about 1,600 sessions on it. So I've been using it about 5 or 6 years now. They've got all these points things, which I love. And I think it's almost like dense strength for your physiology. It's because you get badges and things and you can see your progress, and I can see if I get a new record, and I love all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really like gamified, and I really enjoy that. So for me, it's been a big one. For players I use it with now, I'm the same. I don't know if they're going to stick that they use that because they have to purchase it. Well, I just give them a once off and I show them what happens. I do a baseline. Then I show them what happens when you breathe. And if they're really keen, I might work through the science of it. But I would say 99% of players, I'm not going to talk through what's happening in the autonomic nervous system when you're breathing and that type of stuff. I'm just saying you're having an impact by breathing and you're changing that stress response into a more balanced state. And they can see it. If I say you're going to turn into waves and you're doing little skitters at the start, then they see it, then they know they're having an impact. So I think that's really valuable.
Do you think that's made an impact? Like, you say that you're back playing footy, but you're not back like because you have that standard for yourself of you wanted to be a star player and play at the highest level. But to be able to play, you have to have a certain level of physiology. Like, do you think that's played a big role in you like being able to recover and getting like your physiology back online because of like that change in your psychology of not being in the like fight or flight all the time, not being chronically kind of overstimulated with the sympathetic system? Like,
yeah, absolutely. I think the big ones for me, what I used to feel was, and I've only learnt more about fascia recently, but I used to find I had lots of like tight points where I'd like get that forward head roll and it'd be tight in the shoulders and as I said, Achilles, but all that stuff's come better with movement and training. But
yeah,
I wonder if overall as a system, I think you've probably seen this, people in a flight and fright, they look like a cat, when they've stepped in water or something. It's like, if you start to see that, that's probably someone who's in stress state more often than not. The thing I really enjoy this approach, I appreciate it. It's the body reacts the same to chemical, physical, and emotional stress. So if you're training really hard and overtraining, that's the same interaction in the body as if your emotions are running you down as well. So it's all the same type of stuff. So if you're not managing this stuff, if you're not and I don't mean controlling, I mean priming and preparing and ramping up and down and knowing that it changes. If you just stay in sympathetic activation through your nervous system and it's like your flight fight, then you're not going to have the reserves ready to respond to your next training session, to when you have an actual performance to happen. You've been in it for 24 hours, you're not going to be ready to go. So I think there's heaps of value in it. I also use it, and I thought this might be an interesting point in I don't believe completely in all the hypnotism side of things, but I do believe that they have a way of like priming the nervous system to accept information. So I would say this type of stuff, any sort of breath work is a great primer to physical training or to a session where you're trying to do some coaching with someone one-on-one. So if you're trying to teach someone something and you've done a breath session at the start, you've got their attention monitoring and you've got their physiology ready to accept. Like you can't remember things when you're stressed. You can't remember the capital of Canberra, to Australia, if you're under stress and you're trying to run away from something dangerous. So it's important to remember that this is a physical human being and that we're not just responding exactly the same to every person.
And so that was what like one of the things that helped you to really know that your psychology is playing a big part. Like what else have you sort of added to your own
Mm,
system?
absolutely. And a metaphor I was thinking of today, and probably because I just want to engage with you, was that heart math and physiology, that type of stuff, is like the sled work. So it's like it's your short range stuff. You're really getting that blood flow going. But if you just do meditation, all you do is you're monitoring. You're just becoming aware of what's happening in your internal processes, which is still awesome. If that's all you do, you're on the way. If you look at it as a spectrum of the same, like short to long range, or to someone in suffering to someone flourishing, I would say people who are rigid, if you work on those skills, that gets you to a normal state. You can give up there, but you can also get to like an elite level using those same processes. So for me, I was doing a psych degree, undergraduate, and I tried CBT, which is like the base cognitive behavior therapy. Everyone knows about it. It's evidence based. Didn't work
Yeah.
for me at all, a lot of the processes. So I just started looking at every other approach. I was really into Carl Rogers and the Rogerian person centered approach. I was really into some of the existential therapies. But when I came across this, the third wave, which is acceptance commitment therapy, some of the other ones, which I won't go into, but I found when I experienced it, there was a change in my own interaction with my mind. So I I could see the space between my internal processes and my reactions, and I was able to like take steps back and like choose where I was going next, rather than be like trying to argue and waste energy and you know argue with your mind. I mean, I don't mean arguing physically. So that was where I started to really feel attraction from it, and my partner was into it too, and we're still together. So we've always just been bouncing this off each other. So we talk about it a lot. We talk about where it fits in different parts of society. And for me, it's always been, if I'd had this and some of the other stuff in ATG now when I was 17, I would feel like I want to share that with that version of myself. And that's where I really connected with you and Ben around that young version of me. I really want to get there and go, these are the things you need to be doing. And that's what I feel like I can do at the moment, working with Capras and in our region as well, is get to some of the young guys, especially when they've had an injury, and go, build these skills. It'll help you perform, but it'll also help you not suffer. It's the same skill.
Yeah, I love it. I think it is such an important area, and I know most professional teams are working in this area. They know that the mental side is important. The question is, which tools are best, and as you say, there are kind of those standard methods. But having been through a lot of that yourself, I think, and being relatable to players gives you a real advantage to have an impact with them. Have you are there some guys some stories there that you've really made an impact and sort of feel, yeah, have you got to taste some success, I guess, as a mentor of this style of therapy?
Using it over a long period of time, I'd say it is a hard style to grasp because it's based in like Buddhist roots, although it's evidence based now. There's over 3,000 studies. I think it's about 300 random controlled trials. And in comparison to existing therapies, it's on par, if not better, in some areas. Like it exceeds it in pain management is one of the big areas. It's the evidence-based psychological therapy. So, and end of life care is the other one. So for me, turning that to players, I probably start with the evidence is there. I've had experience using it myself. I know other people that are using it, but it is a challenging thing to grasp because it's a very different way of looking at the mind when society's ingrained certain things in you, like you need to always be happy, negative thoughts mean you're broke, and all these sorts of things. So I think initially it takes a bit of time to get through, but once you get past that, it's a relief for a lot of people. It's like, you mean I don't need to be struggling to get rid of this? I'm normal. Normalization's a big thing, and validating the challenges of an experience is the other big thing. But I think players really get it once they get it. It's huge for them. I would say the couple of players I've had big impacts with were people with challenging some stuff that's been challenging in their past that might have been still sticking with them, and they're like having anxiety around those sorts of stuff. I'd say they have the biggest improvement. So you might get incremental improvement in players that are already psychologically flexible. People who have barriers, they have the biggest improvement. And some of them, like there was one guy I was working with that was that had never played rugby league, played soccer his whole life. And then at 18, he goes to me, I'd like to play for Capras at the time. And he'd just started training with them. And they actually said to him, because he was a cameraman at the time, they said to him, you can't even be training with the team. It's a bad look to have the cameraman training with the squad. So it was a very disheartening moment for him, but probably fair considering he'd never played league consistently. And he was a bit out of shape at the time. So he came to me and said, look, I want to be playing Q Cup. So we set a plan. It was a 2-year plan at the time. We did lots of things. Like we did different trainings, physical trainings, and then we also did this stuff and heart math at the time with him as well. And he ended up against all the odds playing a game in PNG when everyone was out. And he played in the 20s competition and did well in the state here. So, he got that goal in the end. And I think really what we had to do is break it down and go, even though you're going to have these thoughts to say, you've never played before, you're not good enough, all these sorts of barriers, because we were able to build this scaffold. I just lost you for a second. Yeah. So I think that's the important thing.
Making Queensland Cup on 2 years of training is pretty phenomenal. For those who aren't familiar, it's the level under the National Rugby League, like the highest level that you can play in Australia would be the Queensland Cup. So to get there in 2 years is kind of unheard of, really. Like there's probably not another guy in the competition who would have that that story. I've never heard a story like that. So it's pretty outstanding. And obviously the physical, it's one tool, right? The psychological stuff. It's not like you can do this and never not train, not do your weights, not worry about your diet, or it's one component. But that's
and
pretty...
I don't want to take anything away from that guy either. Like I gave him this stuff and he already had like that desire. He was going to do it, and he got in, he trained every morning, he did all that stuff. So not taking any of that away from him. Just saying that when he came to me, these are the things I work with him on, and I think they helped. So
yeah, you can never know what impact you have exactly, and even for yourself, like you've learned a lot of this stuff, you've done it. How much of it, how much of you feeling better in your body is because of ATG? How much of it's because of these psychological therapies? How much is it because you're happy in your relationship? Or you can never quantify exactly what's contributing to what. You look for clues and trends and follow intuition. Like as much as we like science and it's good to quantify things, there's a certain amount that you can never know. You only do your best, and if the result is good, then that's all that counts. And if it's not, then you have to keep looking for other solutions. What's next then for you with this? Like it seems as though that there's something really valuable here. Like the research says there's something valuable. You've experienced it. You've had some wins. Like probably the thing that I love most is then at that stage, like, okay, well, what would you like to do with this? And helping people to look a bit further, aim a bit higher, think a bit bigger, and go and do it, and have the support to go and do it. Like that's probably what I love most, to have those kinds of conversations. So maybe we can have a bit of that conversation now. Like where would you like to take this?
Yeah, and I definitely say I appreciate everything you do in the chat. Like I don't know if anyone realizes it, but you in the Uncommon Success Pulse and the Pulse of ATG, you just are so generous with your time. So it's always like trying to provide prompts to people to look at these sorts of things as well, which is definitely something I appreciate. But for me, I've been looking at it, thinking these questions, and it's a hard one because if I was to just do it in the environment I'm in, I really enjoy that. I love seeing young players, especially, is where I'm at. I think I like seeing them getting these things and then flourishing. So at the moment, I'm doing things like I'll go in early into the gym and we'll do an hour of ATG with the player, and then alongside that, we'll do a breath work at the start, and we'll talk through different concepts in our rest or whatever. And I love doing that combination, and then maybe going for a coffee after and having a bit more of a chat. I really like that, but it's not a scalable business if I want to get the message out there. So I think for me, my passion is sharing this in a way that people understand. I think that's the challenge because there's another Keegan in the pulse of ATG I was talking to, and he's doing a book you might have seen on ACT, on acceptance community theory. We had a chat on it, and he was like, it's one of those things that's so hard to explain. You've got to get metaphors, you've got to use different ways, experiential. So for me, I've got to find a way to get it out there so people can get it and grasp it and experience it and then use it in their lives. And that's probably where I'm at. I want to try and find mediums and channels where I can share this. And I thought this today would be a good chance for that. If I even reach a couple of people, it's hopefully something useful that they can add into their lives or at least look at and share with someone else.
Yeah. There's 6 people tuning in at the moment, and that's the start. Like, to be honest, it only N=1 is everything. If you help that one player and that one coffee, a lot of people are looking to scale before they've actually proven their concept, and they kind of oftentimes can lose sight of N=1 because of research. People will discount, it's only anecdotal, it's one person. That's all there is. There's one person times as many as you touch, and if they have a win, then they have a win, and that's it. Like that's all there is to it. So I love the concept. I love what you're doing. I think it's a great place to start, of being really high touch and so like going as deep as you can with someone to give them everything that you have. That's what Ben's done with ATG. He was coaching a very small number of people in Clearwater in Florida, and he was getting phenomenal results with them, and that gave him the confidence of like, I know I can do something else with this. I'm not sure what it is. And when we started speaking, he had 50 online members, and he was sort of thinking like there's something more, but I don't know what it is or how to get there. And now we can all see it. It looks clear and obvious, and he's so good at content. He's so consistent, and it's like, of course, he was going to be that person who goes on Joe Rogan and stuff. But it wasn't necessarily clear to him, 3-4 years ago that was going to be the case. All he did was get those phenomenal results with the people that turned up, like whoever that was. So and that spread. So I love the way you're starting with that, and I would love to think that within my community and potentially from today's conversation, you get the opportunity to have more conversations of N=1. Like, I think I'd like to have a conversation, Johnny, and how can I go further with this? The challenge for you then is, how do you deliver that? Like when there is less touch and when it is somewhat of a complex conversation, like how do you systemize that? What could you put together that someone could experience as a one-off over 7 days, over 30 days? What are the on-ramps to this way of being, way of thinking, where someone can experience it without a lot of risk, without a lot of commitment, to move in that direction? These are kind of the questions to answer, and regardless
and I think I started that too.
Yeah. So like what? I mean, it's we don't usually go as deep on this on like the podcast type scenario, because I kind of, I don't know, it's just like a different energy, I guess, when we're talking about building that business. But what is it like? Is it the heart math concept and experience? Is that where you think people will start? I mean, you want to start really with where people are at, like what's most important to them, what's bothering them, like what's kind of the pain point that you would see as the thing that someone would want help with, that they can identify, that they clearly understand in themselves that they're experiencing.
Absolutely. I think that's, if I look at you guys and a lot of the ATG community, it's like people don't just come to you because everything's good. They come because they've got a niggling injury, or they want this performance improvement. They've seen other people get it. It's like they're looking for that solution. There's normally a specific thing that you start with, and you give them some of that experience and early wins, and then you start to move on from there. I was going to say, sorry for cutting you off there. I was going to say, I've started that process with my research. So I'm in a PhD pathway. So what we're looking at with acceptance and commitment therapy is I'm working with the sports science team at CQU, and we're looking at monitoring and acceptance theory, which is like a breaking down version of this. But it's, if I was to give it simply, it's that mindfulness is monitoring. The issue in the research is that you can have someone who's like a long distance runner. You teach them mindfulness, their performance gets worse. Why is that? So the theory behind this is that it's, if you're just monitoring, you're just noticing pain, you're just noticing sensations. If you're doing something difficult, that's not helpful. So you need to also teach acceptance skills at the same time. So you need something tangible. So the way we're looking at researching it, and this is just in proposal stage, we're still working through it, is we're looking, this is sounds awful, but heat tolerance tests. So we're using like heat on someone and then seeing whether some of these skills will help them deal with higher levels of heat tolerance and pain. So is their pain threshold higher after the skill testing? So I'm really trying to build in, I'm working with the research team because I really want to build my own research into this context, and while doing the one-on-ones with people and developing the skills there. So I'm starting down that pathway. I think it'll be like a snowball. It'll sort of pick up traction, and hopefully at the end of a PhD, I might have 4 published studies, hopefully that'll lead into the work that I'm doing and show that it does work and that it's good for specific things in sport. So that's my hope.
So is the motivation of the PhD to have proof for others, or is it to like learn for yourself? Is there do you think it's going to bring you new knowledge, or is it to have more ammunition to be able to go and make an impact?
Little bit of both. I'd say you're probably right. It's more the systematic review at the start will be, I'll learn a lot. I'll learn more like everything and step back and fit it into context. But I think you're right. I already know that it works. So for me, it's not learning that these things work in these contexts. It's more doing it in a rigorous scientific way so that I can then share it with other people. I find it useful though to talk to players about, no one cares if you say I've used it on myself, unless I'm a millionaire and I'm showing all these successful things. They don't really care that I've used it on myself. If I say though that I've researched this and I'm studying it at a high level, then it's sort of a bit more of a merit when you start. Eventually, if you get experiences and you give people success, they don't care where you start, really. But it's just an easier starting point, I feel, to have that credentials next to my name to say, yeah, I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there definitely are positives to having formal education. Some people call PhD, piled higher and deeper. Some Poor, hopeless, and desperate is the one that Robert Kiyosaki uses, the rich dad, poor dad guy. I think Paul Chek says piled higher and deeper. But like there definitely are benefits to it, and it takes a lot of work, and a lot of great things come from that scientific field. At the same time, if you look at ATG, if Ben had gone that path, he would have had zero impact at this stage. Like there's no study that he could have produced. There's no series of studies he could have produced that would have had an impact on the way the world trains versus working with one person and then turning that into, just doubling that it's probably doubled every, I don't know, whatever period of time it is. But, and then it eventually, that it really is changing the way the world trains. Like there's a good chance in any gym on any given day that you'll see someone doing ATG type training or movements that you would never have seen, training their tibs or training their split squats, training Nordics. Like you wouldn't have seen it 4 years ago, and you can see it now. So like to me, that's what matters most is those results. And sometimes, when you do the scientific stuff and you're in that scene, you think that that's where the validity comes from. As you say, I would agree. Like the athletes, they want to see results. They don't necessarily care 100% about like you, but that is still a strong level of proof. And Ben's really done that. Like he's marketed solely based on himself. Like he could have marketed based on working with a lot of NFL players, and he made that decision early. Like NFL, NBA, NHL. Like what he's worked with Major League Baseball. He's worked with top 5, top 10 athletes in pretty much all the major US sports. But he's chosen not to market even based on that. It's really just been, this is working for me. test it for yourself. And that works. Now, dunking is easier for people to see. It's more difficult for people to see what does your mind look like. And yeah, you could prove it through wealth. You can prove it through performance, but it's challenging to prove. I mean, Wim Hof's probably done the best job of that. And it's interesting you've chosen temperature, because that's probably the best way of showing, like, yeah, my mind's different to the average mind. Look at what I can do. And he went and broke all those world records, and he was definitely, he is into the Eastern philosophy type stuff. There's probably some real similarities, but I'm a huge fan of that approach. Having a PhD on the side is also great. It takes a lot of energy and effort, and sometimes that means you don't get the other things. But that's something my experience around, or my one way of looking at it, I guess.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's good to think in different ways, because sometimes you do get stuck in these echo chambers where you hear the same things. And working with researchers, they all sprout.
They love research because
Well,
I work with business owners, and so I love business, and that's been the big thing for me, was like turning it into real products and having that accountability of, this person's paid for something. Are they happy with what they've paid for? Like I really like that direct accountability, which is, it's kind of different with that other system. There's not necessarily that direct accountability for results. It's more like a long-term change the system, change the way people are educated, which is important as well. It's just a different path. But yeah, the on-ramp is the key. I think that's the key thing of inside ATG. A lot of people on-ramped through sleds. They saw one or two movements and they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, I'll give that a go. And especially with sleds, like oftentimes people be like, wow, like I do feel a difference after this. Like things that hurt before don't hurt. Like this is phenomenal. Coming up with that powerful on-ramp that invites people into the longer journey is probably one of the, something for anyone who wants to make an impact on the world. Like, how do you do that? I was watching that Mr. Beast podcast with Joe Rogan. If you haven't seen it, like, I think it's something that everyone should watch. He has a different sort of psychology going on to a lot of people. His hook thing on the top of his YouTube page. So he's the number one subscribed YouTube channel, and he has the most views on his YouTube channel. So he has 91 million subscribers on his main channel, and then he has channels in other languages and gaming channels and reaction channels. So I think he has 200 something million subscribers. But his hook video is literally him giving away cash to people. So that's kind of his on-ramp of, like, he asked people on the street, like, are you following me? Are you subscribed? Like, show me on your phone, open your phone up, show me. And if they say yes, he just gives them a wad of cash. And that's his, like, hook thing on his YouTube. Because his goal, his whole sole purpose in life is to be the most watched person on YouTube. And so he's been dedicating himself since he was 11 to making viral videos. He's now 23, and he's, but interestingly, like, he doesn't keep any of the money. He puts all the money back into the videos. So he's making these like $5 million productions and 10 million, like he's spending millions and millions of dollars. He has a team of over 100 staff, and he literally isn't accumulating wealth. Wow. So it's a crazy, I mean, it's a challenging philosophy, but it's like still being maximally valuable. I love that idea of, like, he's trying to provide as much value as he can to the world. He just doesn't want to keep it, but he's still rich because he could work for any marketing agency. He's got all these connections. Like, he's been on Joe Rogan now. Like, he can't be poor even if he wanted to, because of the brain that he's developed and the connections that come with that. And I think that that's something to strive for. Like, how could I provide maximal value to this? So I didn't care about money and business and whatever. Like, how can I get this value out to the world? I think everyone should do that. Like that's everyone who has the desire of feeling of like, I've got something important here. Like there's inherent frustration that comes with that. And I think that's a positive thing of like, no, the world needs to know this. And, Ben had it with the knee thing. Mr. Beast, had that thing of like, I'm going to have that number one YouTube channel in the world. You have this thing of like, this is really important. This does make a difference to lives. A lot of athletes, they don't deal well with, they have these psychological challenges, these physical challenges, and it's tough to come back from them. Like how could you maximally express that? What is the on-ramp? Like circling back, the handing out cash is not going to be your thing because your goal isn't the subscribers. But what is that thing that people would see straight away and go, oh yeah, like this is for me. This is interesting. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to answer, but in attempting to answer it, it's in attempting to answer it, like that gets a creative thing flowing. How could you what could you talk about in your first call that would open people up to other possibilities that they hadn't considered before? That concept of sort of like a high value first interaction. That's another, like, I guess that's after the first thing that grabs their attention. But if you can, if you have that, then you get to test the next thing, which you're really confident in the end thing. But what's the, like, how do you get people started on the path? Is there
breaking it down?
Yeah. And it's not simple like you see with my stuff. Like I love a big broad range of things, but if you can try and have that key concept of what you want people to achieve, like that people can latch onto. And I think with Uncommon Success, it really is about how do you get your value out to the world. Like I have spoken a lot about becoming wealthy, and I do value that. But mostly from the perspective of like, we've all got something valuable to offer, and our best life and best experience of life is in expressing that. And some people choose not to, that's fine. But those who want to express it and feel frustration of not being able to express it as well as they can, like that's what it's for.
So
that would be the, how do you express more of it is probably the thing that I'd love to go, continue the conversation on, like, because you've done it with some of those guys, and then okay, well, what's next? I don't know if you come across the work of Tony Priddle. I was going to ask you.
No.
He worked with he played at the Dragons when my father was the coach there way back in the day, in the 90s, and so he works with the same sort of like psychology of elite athletes, and he's doing some work. He's with Brisbane Raw, and he's worked with a lot of athletes and teams. And I was wondering if you'd cross paths because you got the footy background and psychology of athletes.
I normally keep an ear out for. So did you ever run into John Novak at the Roosters? He was around for a few years. Yeah.
What was his?
So he was a dancer on Aerobics Oz Style. Do you remember that back in the 90s?
Yeah.
He was a dancer. So he was at the Roosters for like 5 years, and he worked with the first grade side and did all the mind game. His anyone wants to look him up, Boomerang Effect is his mind game stuff. But he does a lot more work with golfers. So I think golf has a lot of like they use a lot of these sorts of skills, and it works really. It's very measurable. You can see like they were focused. They hit that strike. Complex sports like rugby league and other ones, it's harder to show the impact. It's sort of like on average, how do you feel? Is it things getting better? So it's you can still feel it, but it's harder.
Yeah. It's not as black and white with finite skill, like as golf is. I think that's one of the first examples that I saw with the heart math thing as well, was like being able to control the heart rate variability while listening to really loud music and like being in a stressful environment and maintaining. Have you played around with it much like that, like challenging yourself with stress?
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of the best things. It's like you can figure out what different things do. If you even with players, I sometimes sit next to them, I'll make a loud clap, and then I'll show them how like it'll spike their stress. So you'll see this like scattered. So I love
Yeah,
doing that stuff. I love trialing different meditations and seeing how they work.
yeah,
If you've seen anyone who's keen on like the podcast and seeing Dr. Andrew Huberman, the one on gratitude is a really good podcast, and it's a very powerful. I'm measuring it on myself. Gratitude, love, compassion, any of these sorts of emotions, if you can really nail them, have much better impacts on the measurements for me when I do that type of stuff. So I have my best sessions if I can really nail a moment where someone was grateful towards me. But it's a hard one because there's tricky things too. Like you start thinking then, and if you get hooked too much with your thoughts, you get distracted. But it's lots of fun. I love it. I think all of us are here because we like experimenting and being that canary and going in and trialing things and find out what works, and then you get that little nugget that works, and you go, I want to share that with someone, and that's sort of where I'm at. I'm thinking I've got a couple of things that are worthwhile. I'd love to keep sharing those with the players I'm working with, and then hopefully, reach more people with that type of stuff because I know it works in certain contexts at least.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to touch a bit more on the physical, like the ATG journey for you so far. How did you come across the method?
Yeah, it's a weird sort of situation. Knew I was coming back to play local footy last year, and I went look up VMO activation. So that was how I came across one of Ben's videos and saw.
Google or YouTube?
I can't remember. Probably YouTube. I don't
Yeah,
really.
yeah, yeah.
I
You didn't
avoid
Google
it.
it.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but then straight away, then I fell down the rabbit hole. Turned up to I don't know if you ever heard of a training model called Zoo.
Yeah,
ZU. Yeah, so I went to a Zoo session and I was talking to the trainer there, and I was like, "Hey, I've been trialing these split squats. They're amazing." He goes, "You got to go and look up Keegan and the Real Movement Project." And I was like, "Oh, righto." So that's when I started down the rabbit hole. And Lionel Harbin, who was the person who put me onto it, he's the Capra's coach now, and he's been a big fan for years. So he knows he'll walk backwards up Mount Archer, which is the local mountain, and he then does Jefferson curls off the rock with rocks up the top and split squats. So he's just one of those nutcases that even though he's a head coach, he just does everything himself and he lives the stuff that he talks about. So no, I think he really pushed me, and he's a zoo fanatic too. So he does all the animal movements, and yeah, he was the one that got me into that originally. So I knew he was onto something when he brought up this stuff. And then when you experience it, I don't think you can stick to this unless you know it works. It's just such a big commitment. So once you trial it, I was dabbling. I did split squats, reverse Nordics, and tib raises. That was all I did for like 3 or 4 months. And I got so much benefit out of that I just went, okay, you got to stop just going, you can't have weak spots in other areas and build these up. And then I started to went to the online program and then joined the coaching in January and just went, righto, let's do this. Let's get into it and share it with other people too. Yeah.
And what was the biggest thing you were looking for with it? Like, is it still knee issues with the primary driver? If you're looking up VMO, then I guess.
Yeah, I lost a heap of weight after I finished playing footy, so I started around 115 kg. When I finished playing, I'm down to about 97, and I still had knee pain. And it went away initially, but then it came back. And a lot of people, I needed something to push myself, so I went long distance running and did a half marathon, and just had constant knee pain, and I couldn't get rid of it. So that was where it was like, okay, I need to find a new way of doing things. And now my missus is just like, tries to push me away from people at parties because I don't want to be that guy, but someone comes up and says I got knee pain. I'm like, you got to check out this stuff online. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So how long was it? Like, did you notice? What do you think it was there? Because you see, you started with the tib raises, reverse Nordics. Like, was that enough for you to? Did you do backwards like sleds? Did you mention that there? Like, no. And did you get some results with just those movements before you did the full program, like for your knee?
Yeah, absolutely. The reverse Nordics, when I first did them, it just felt like something was pushing around in the joint. It just felt like stretching and pain. And so I just really regressed that. and then slowly built it up. And that was the first thing that I started to feel like I had more space to deal with whatever was going on. More range, I guess, is probably the
Yep.
right. I'm not the best at. I'm not an exercise physiologist or a PT or anything. So talking in these stuff, I try and get the lingo right. But apologies if I miss anything up. You can just.
I think space is space is definitely a way that some people will sort of refer to it. I think Kelly Starrett I think uses that kind of language if I'm not mistaken, and it's cool to hear it like more from an intuitive sense. Like you learn so much from players, the way they understand their bodies and the language that they use, and even the way they instinctively want to train, I think is often better than what they're actually being trained with. Like, so, yeah, that's in effect the reverse Nordic. Like the lighter or the gentler way of getting into that, if someone's listening, is like the couch stretch is like a gentler way to get to that. That some people get issues with, like the reverse Nordic. It's kind of like an aggressive way to lengthen the rectus femoris and challenge the knee. But if you don't have enough of a foundation there, like there's a higher risk for sure with the reverse Nordic than, for example, with the couch stretch. I mean, it's cool that you got the result, and nothing works 100% for everybody. But it's a powerful movement. But yeah, so you felt as though that was the big thing that got you a win and sort of the buy into ATG as far as like an on-ramp goes.
I'd done everything. So at that point I was like, I was talking to my missus' brother, and he was like, you're getting to that age, mate. This is just something you have to deal with from now on. You just got knee pain. That's just the way it is. So I'd had it for like 5 years, 6 years, and then all through footy. So it was something where I was like, this is never going to go away. So to actually see a result, you're just like, whoa, what's going on now? Like what else is possible if this worked? And you've seen it with players now. I just talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, I'm getting pain below my knees, and I'm like, I know something if you want to give it a try, and there's other people looking at getting meniscectomies and that, and just like cartilage, there's some stuff to say if you can get the nutrients in there and you can try these sort of squeezing movements, you can sort of and build up those muscles. I was reading the ATG clinician in the chat. He's awesome too. But it was one he was saying, you just ramp up the quads, and because the cartilage should be that last point of impact to absorb that force. So if you can be getting everywhere else catching it, like these things make sense when people hear them, and then when you experience them, it's just life-changing, I would say. Like to change that trajectory from knee pain for the rest of my life was such a big thing for me.
And people kind of get hexed with the idea that, yeah, you're going to have that for the rest of your life. There's nothing you can do about it. You get told you got bone on bone, like get used to it. Maybe we can keep operating on it. But, often athletes get told you're going to have a joint replacement, in the future. Like it's kind of a black magic thing where nobody knows that. Nobody knows, like, maybe people are going to work something out and it's going to be healed. Like you should always stay open to the possibility that things will get better. I think in every aspect of life, but with injuries and niggles especially, we don't know everything and things can change, and like they have for you and for so many other people. I don't know if you know Sedamata Sarr. He was
in my 20s side back in the
day. Yeah. Should have made that connection earlier, but yeah, he was at the Catalan Dragons when we were there, and he'd obviously had really serious chronic knee injuries, and we got him squatting, and he started squatting every day, and I wasn't even telling him to do it, but eventually his back and his knees were feeling much better. He still had challenges through his career because I didn't know about the full ATG system and stuff at that time, and maybe it wouldn't have solved everything for him, but he got much better and got back to playing some really good footy and whatnot. But he's been doing ATG recently as well, and said it's made a big impact for him. He's up there in Mackay, or still connected with the footy as well. So yeah, it's probably a good one to reconnect with.
I saw that you talk about Troy Savage a bit, and he was around. I wasn't in a team with him, but he's done a podcast with Anthony Charrington too. He's done a heap of. They're both into the ATG stuff, and Anthony Charrington had 2 ACLs in the preseason. It might have even been 3 at the start of a trial, and that like sidetracked his career. So he's now like
Yeah.
huge advocate of all this stuff. So
Yeah. Were you there at the same time as Chero? Or yeah,
Chera was
yeah,
my year. Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's so. I mean, yeah. We so Troy Savage was in Real Movement for quite a while, and then he came to the training camp that I did with Sonny when that was really the biggest application of ATG that I've had. I had a month with Sonny Bill before he went to the like Toronto to play, in the Super League. But Troy came up for that camp and joined in on that, and that's when he sort of realised, there's something to this, and we also spoke a lot about business and stuff, and he was doing a bit of work for me with Real Movement, and then he sort of got that clarity of, I'm going to do this footy mobility, and he was working roadside, looking after, making sure the roads were clear for roadworks in Sydney, and he really wanted to do something else when we first started working together, as you would, like doing night shifts and whatnot. And now he's got that brand. He's worked with the New Zealand Maori team, and he's worked with tons of pro athletes. No exercise science background, did Real Movement, and then came to that camp and sort of has run with things. And like your story. It's not that I did it. Troy's a high achiever and someone who works really hard. He came to one of my workshops, actually, and we did handstands, and it was probably the first time that he'd been worst in the group at something athletic. And, now he's got great handstands as well as, all the other stuff that he's done. It's not as much part of his brand anymore. But, I love that he's been, he's gone on that journey, and maybe he would have done it himself in some way, and he's definitely a high achiever. But it's cool to be, to be a contributor, be a part of other guys' sort of journeys. But yeah, Chero was there at the Roosters as well when I went there in 2013. He was there for the start of that. Some of those, Robbo made some big changes in the first little couple of months that he was there. But it's cool to see those guys helping to get the word into footy. I know that it's coming from a lot of different angles in terms of the
Absolutely.
ATG stuff. I was just speaking with Paddy about it yesterday. Like he's talking to a lot of players that they've worked it out for themselves. Like some of them are bringing it to Paddy, saying, "Hey, you probably need to go further with this," and inspiring him to, like as we were sort of talking about yesterday. But yeah, so you where are you at with it now? Like you sort of got that out of progression with the knee. Like what are you doing with your own training, and where are you headed with that now?
I think one thing I like, and I think is something you're talking about, like Ben with dunking. I'm trying to get something where I can get some things that I can visually show that like this stuff is giving me this. Like I know I feel faster, I know I'm fitter. Like all these things are true, and I'm injury free. But I would like to like trial some things and go like, yeah, can I told you this a while back, but I was like, maybe I could, in the chat, I was like, stretch goal, try and play a game of Queensland Cup again. Very stretch goal, considering I work with the team. But things like that where I could like show I was able to do this at the age of 34. What could you be doing if you're 18 and trialing this stuff? So that's where I'd like to get that excel. I said to you before that I'm not a freak athlete. I'm not some sort of genetic mutant or something. I thought that was funny, that mutant conversation when you chat with Pat yesterday too. Very left field, but I'd like to just show. I've always been someone that if I do the work, I get the results. I don't, as long as I'm putting in regularly. So I think I could ramp up and show that I could be, get my CMJ above average, or like right up there to show players what it's like. Speed, sprints, maybe the 1.2, like different testing, but also then on the football field. So I got a bust on this eye. Played in a carnival on the weekend. It's a Murray Carnival for anyone who's seen some of those, and we played 5 games. So, at the age of 34, one of the oldest guys in playing in the field, I was able to get through 5 half games, but of football, and still go against all these guys that are 18, 19, 20 that have got bodies that regenerate like nothing else. So I think I think that's one of the things I value in HESG is being the example, but how I think I'm still trying to figure out what where I sit with that. Do I need to be playing? Maybe not, but I like being able to put it out there and go, check this out, sort of stuff.
Yeah. Players definitely respect and resonate with other players and people who know what they're going through. But at the same time, it's like a bless. You can do it and it can work, but it's also not an excuse to not have the results that you want. Like, I think sometimes a lot of people, with the example of knees over toes guy Ben Patrick, is like, oh, okay, when I can do X, Y, Z, then I'll start helping other people. And it's like, no, that's not really how it works. Like, he was helping a bunch of people. He was coaching. He wasn't world famous, but he was doing a bunch of things. And that's a big part of why you get to recover and get results with yourself, is because you're learning from yourself and from others. Again, going to the Mr. Beast podcast I was listening to, like he got in a group with 4 or 5 other guys who wanted to also do well on YouTube. I think they had about 20,000 followers each at the time, subscribers, and they started just critiquing each other's videos, and they would get on a live call every day and critique each other's videos, and they were all obsessed with it, and they all got to 1 million followers within, I think he said within a month, but it was like within a short period of time that they all sort of cracked it. And so, like, having that mastermind, but having that third party feedback, and he was talking about you just don't get enough feedback, you don't get enough failure, you don't get enough anything on your own. So it's like, by putting it out there, by coaching, by doing your best with what you have, like, that's really where you learn. And if we're talking about ATG, then there's plenty of stuff, there's plenty of support there. The system's relatively simple for anyone to be able to apply it, and you don't have to have had your own results. You can say, like, check out this channel, check out this pro athlete that he's working with, etc. Same for you with the therapy that you're talking about. It's like, well, you've quoted to me that there's thousands of studies and different trials and your own experience. So there's no actual need for anything else to be able to, like, to validate. It's already, there can always be more. There can always be more results, but, like, get into it, and don't let that be a kind of a mental crutch, because you can always make that excuse of, oh yeah, like, when I've helped 100 more people,
my daughter's there.
yeah. When you've helped 100 more people, you can, then I'll, or when I can do X, Y, Z myself, like when I can dunk, or when I can, it's cool if you do it, but it probably doesn't. It's like, it's a dichotomy where you want to value your own journey and value, like, it would be valuable if you, whatever you do, if you go play Q Cup, if you go play, NRL, like Ben was talking about, like, playing in the NBA and coaching an NBA team and playing, that was part of sort of his story 2-3 years ago. He was thinking quite a lot about that. I don't think he's thinking like that anymore, but he didn't need to do that to do what he's done. But he still plays, and people can see, well, yeah, he can play. It doesn't really matter whether he makes the NBA or not. Like, it doesn't matter whether you make the Q Cup or not. But if you show, I'm working and this is what I can do, then there's some respect that comes with that, and you can show that with the gamification of the heart math stuff. Like, it's really clear if you've done 1,600 sessions or such. Like, then you've clearly done the work, where someone will go, oh well, like, he really believes in this, like that. I think that is really valuable to be able to say, like, I've done 1,600 sessions of heart math, or I've done X amount of sessions of ATG. This is where I was at when I started. This is where I'm at now. To me, that would probably carry more weight than than a lot of the other stuff that you could talk about. And then, like, word of mouth is probably the biggest thing. Like, if you look at Troy Savage as an example, if he'd have gone down the academic path, we probably started working together 2017. So if he'd gone down the academic path, he'd just be finishing his bachelor's, or maybe towards the end of his master's, somewhere, depending on how it went for him. If he was part-time, then he'd be, versus what the path that he has taken, where he's already working with pro athletes, and the odds that people who go and get their bachelor's and masters work with pro athletes at international level, or a bunch of guys like pretty slim. So he's gone and done it without going down that path because he took the path of action. But it should take 5 or 10 years as well. Like from when you decide I want to make a huge impact, it's 5 or 10 years later. You if you stay really focused, you probably will.
What do you say? Olympic dream. What's your Olympic for the?
Yeah. It's like if you want to go to the Olympics, it's not a decision that you make today and then go tomorrow. It's and think in sort of 2 cycles. Like where will I be by the next Olympic Games and the one after? Like that gives you enough time to take action, but not too much time that it's just some pipe dream. Like your life vision, or one day I want to do this, but that doesn't necessarily spur us into action. Where if for example with you, Johnny, like if you said I'd like to help 50 NRL players come back from injury, or I'd like to work with 50 pro athletes, or I'd like to have the most read book or the most watched podcast about sports injury psychology, or then you can say, like let's do that by 2028 and then reevaluate, okay, what's next after that. Finding something that's exciting for you, I think it's such a gift, it's such a blessing. And if it is that PhD that's like, I'm buzzing to do this, then cool. But I feel for people who don't have that in their lives, and whenever I don't have that, it's tough. Like I definitely didn't have that for periods. Like when I was backpacking in my 20s and stuff, I was trying to find like where do I get to contribute? Who am I? Where am I going? And you can do, you can accept that and do the, you can be in a good place mentally in a way while you're searching. But I think there's still going to be that thing of like, I'm meant to be doing something with this lifetime. I think it's okay to have that feeling of like, I'm meant to be doing something. And I think you get that inherent reward of I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. Like, are you experiencing some of that with your journey in the last sort of year or so?
Yeah, one-on-one stuff, I often come home to them because I work in community services as well. So I do a lot of like charity type work and stuff, but I get a buzz out of that. But when I do the one-on-ones with players and I come home, or I've done a session for the whole team and we talk about breath work, or we talk about psychological flexibility or anything like that, I always come back and it's like I'm just glowing for a few days. So that stuff just gets me going. It's definitely powerful for me. And anytime I wish I could just do it all the time. I wish money wasn't an issue. And I think you've helped me reframe some of that in the uncommon success stuff. Is like, look, you get what you deserve, and you can't be changing the world if you can't eat. I think that was the quote, something along those lines.
Sounds like something I'd say.
Yeah, but look, and the other thing I would say, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins and Mr. Beast. I've only looked at a little bit of that stuff, but Tony Robbins always says you can't get more than you give to other people. But I think that's more in like your values. So if you look at like Gary Vee type stuff, that jab, 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 right hook, you just keep giving more value to other people. And I think if as a mentor in the space we're working in, you do that really well. You give so much value out. I'm not surprised that things are coming back to you in your life the way you know. But the other thing I was thinking with Mr. Beast is I constantly hear little YouTubers talk about Mr. Beast reached out and gave me this feedback about how I can improve. So whenever I see that, I think he's not doing that to become huge. He's doing that because he's helping other people, and he's someone who. So I think when
he spoke about that too.
Did he?
Yeah. He spoke about that of like. The example he gave was that a guy that was making about 20 grand a month started making 400 grand a month within 6 months or something, 8 months of, and he was giving him tips. But he said what he loves about it, he does it for free, and what he loves about it is that he gets to test his ideas. Like, is this really such a good idea? Like, do I really know this stuff inside out that it gets turned straight into money? Like, that's the buzz for me. And like that podcast really made me rethink, like, what am I actually teaching here? What do I really value? Like, I don't actually care whether I become wealthy. Like, I'm happy to couch surf or whatever. And the thing is, if I am able to help, like, to support you to what you want to achieve and a bunch of other people, and you all help each other, like, that's what means a lot to me. And I know then that if I'm in a tough spot or if I'm in Australia, like you'll probably help me out. Like whether, and so the wealth is there whether it's monetary or not by being really valuable. So there's no, like, it's not a rejection of like this stuff is valuable and there should be value generated through it. But it really doesn't matter whether like Rogan decides to keep most of his wealth and he's not super public about it, but he's got a big car collection. He talks about like having fuck you money, and like I like that perspective. I get that perspective, but then you've got like that Mr. Beast perspective of like I'm gonna do this so well and be do exactly what I'm meant to be doing, and I don't need to receive like I don't need to hold on to anything. And that's kind of the it's like a challenging way to look at it, where he is wealthy, he just doesn't hold it. It's like the wealth is all out there in the world with people whose life is affected and who know that he's really valuable, who would pay for his consulting if he was going to offer it as a service or whatever. It's a funny thing that it's challenging me because I just want the impact, like, and it's like it makes no difference whether someone's paying me $1,000 for the call or whether it's free. Like from my side, it matters from their side often because they listen with different ears, potentially with the investment side. But that's a bit of it's only one way to motivate people. Like it's a bit of an excuse. Like you can get results with people for free if they know you're good enough. And I suppose that's what Mr. Beast, he has that massive credibility. And I can work on that myself to have more results, more credibility, more good content, where people feel that it's money isn't the only way to do it. So this is stuff that's sort of rattling around in my brain. It doesn't, in a way, it like even motivates me even more to be better at what I'm doing, like by taking that selfish kind of side of it out of it, and being really clear of like it is really what I'm here for. Like it's what I do best. It's what I love. Like keep doing it. And if I could take that out of the equation, that I, like you're sort of saying as well, but you haven't decided to maximally provide value to the world yet. Like you've, in the way that, at least in my lens, So
I think I'd like to do videos and content and stuff, but I think I've got some avoidance around putting myself out there on camera and different things. So I think that's where I'm at with that type of thing. So I think this conversation might be a good one to go, hey, use some of these skills on yourself and just make it happen.
Well, you have used them on yourself, and it's only it's doing that then into another area, and we all feel it. Like nobody's killing it on every platform, or feels completely comfortable with every type of video that they might make or whatever. But just expanding 5%, 10% from where you are is like, could you make one presentation? Could you, make one post, make one? Just taking that one next step can sometimes be the catalyst for what becomes then a habit, because you have that vision for yourself. So, and I'd love to see you. I'd love to see you do that, and I can see that you have a ton of knowledge and experience, and your own story as an athlete is a really powerful one to get to the place that you're in now. A lot of athletes get into a downward spiral when they miss out on their identity's challenged and all those sorts of things. And like you have overcome that. You've got that positivity. You've gone and got yourself a degree, and you've got a role in a footy team, and you've done a lot of the things that a lot of players would like to do whether they make it or they don't make it. If like being able to share that or to transfer that ability to others is something that's super, super valuable, and I think you'll get a lot of joy out of. So, I appreciate the discussion, Johnny, and it's good to get the chance to sit down and share. And those who have listened in, if they want to connect more, like what's the best way to get in touch with you?
That's the other thing. I'm completely absent from all social media, so I'm not anywhere. But I guess I'm on Telegram now because ATG made me.
I can drop your Telegram link in there so people can DM you there if that's the best way, or you could have an email or...
email's good too. Yeah, either one. I'm happy to share both of those. If
Cool.
that's cool.
Well, I'll put it in the description, and then people can reach out if there was something here that they need to act on. I'm sure a huge part of the ATG audience is dealing with this side of things. So the mental challenge as well as the physical is real with a lot of stuff. So really appreciate your time, and it was great to connect. Chat
Awesome.
soon.
Thanks, Keegan. See you, buddy.